What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Book Binge. I'm actually not entirely certain which one this is off the top of my head. I'm just recording a quick intro because I did a discussion with Nicole Pierman, who you can find on YouTube at Nicole's Bookish Nook, I believe it is. I have her tagged in the description of this video, if nothing else. And I had a fun time talking with her. I don't really have a smooth transition into the conversation for this one, just because we kind of talked for a little bit, and then we got right into some of the questions rather than doing a little bit more of a smooth transition, as I said. So, with that being said, I'm gonna let you go. Enjoy the rest of the video. Did you ever come up with any topics that you wanted to be able to discuss specifically? Because I have some ideas.
No, I don't really plan stuff out. Everyone knows that.
I feel like you did mention that.
So,
I was introduced to your work through Obsidian Murders, first book in Midnight Detective Agency. Is that what it's still called? Did I write that?
yes.
I wrote that down
Yeah.
properly? Okay, that's good. I don't like making those kinds of mistakes. And you're currently working on the second book right now. I just kind of want to know what your writing process for those has been like, because I think your writing process is a lot different than mine.
I'm pretty pantser-ish, though I have been told by my friend Thomas, who's also a writer and was uh, writing, or does he still? I don't know. He did, or currently still doing screenwriting. And he said I do outline. I thought for a long time that what I was doing was just completely pantsing, but I know the ending and the beginning, and I know all the character information, so that is apparently not pantsing. So I guess I'm in the middle because I struggle with the middle of most of my books. I am then now trying to fix that, especially for Murderous Fairies, because I'm well, actually, I think I've passed the middle. I'm probably 80% done. And what I'm doing right now is what you call bare bones writing, where you're not looking about how many chapters are in the book, where you're not looking at any type of word count, and you're not necessarily even filling in a lot of description. You're just trying to get the book done, and then you'll go back in the second version or the second draft and then fix stuff and add stuff. But I was too much focused. And actually, I'll bring in that I do have OCD and I have numbers OCD. So I was obsessing
All right.
over getting a specific word count for everything, that it was, I don't even know if it was necessarily a problem with the middle part, because I thought about it in my standalones. I really didn't have a middle part issue. It was, I was needing to get a specific word count or else. And that's that's an OCD issue. So I had to step back and say, well, there's no such thing as or else. I'm the one writing it, and I don't have a editor. I have an editor. I don't have like a publisher with an editor and an agent to say it needs to be this. So I'm doing this to myself. So I took up the bare bones technique, and it is what it is. I don't even know if I'm going to get to 45,000 words for the first draft, but that doesn't matter. It just needs to be done.
Right, right. I would say that's somewhere in the middle of pantsing and outlining, but I would say leaning more towards pantsing in your case.
Yeah.
Because you can have anywhere from not knowing a thing when you start to obviously knowing a little bit of something but figuring it out while you're writing, to having a little bit more of an idea but figuring out between the scenes or between the major moments, and then like full on outlining and having basically everything planned out. I feel like those are like the four different categories that you can
Hmm.
have. I fall very much further on the outlining side. Like,
Hmm.
I have these scenes and what happens in each scene lined up for all of the outlines that I've been working on, which is quite different from your technique, it seems.
Yeah. I have tried to do an actual outline and it has never worked. It's either I don't finish it and so I'm wasting months when it could just be writing time, or I'll write it down and then it's just different because it's the flow of things. I looked into Save a Cat and I bought the book, so I'm gonna.
That's the worst lag I've had. None of my calls with anybody else have done that before.
That was probably me. That's why I can't do live. I don't
Yeah,
know where I was, but you're gonna maybe have a lot of editing. Sorry, keep it down to like 1 hour or less because of the lag.
right. I mean,
At
it's
least,
something that I have to deal with anyway with other stuff too, so
oh yeah.
not the end of the world.
Well, yeah. So whenever I lag, then you could just maybe say lag, so then it's also easier for you to find it. Because
Well,
there
I'll
was a
know because there'll
problem.
be probably a little bit of silence on your end with silence on my
Oh,
end too. Plus, whenever I do editing, I'm actually watching through the whole thing and cutting out the bits that don't need to be there, and that's my process. So
oh yeah, same.
yeah, I don't give myself clues and markers to find like some
Oh,
people do. Like some people, if they have a lot of space, they'll do like a clap to find where that is, so that they know approximately where there's something to cut out. But I'm just like, well, if I watch the whole thing, I know what I'm cutting out anyway. But
yeah, yeah.
regardless, I completely forget what the train of thought was that you were about to go on when you lagged out. But one thing that I was going to
Oh,
ask was, you mentioned not having a middle book problem with your standalones or something along those lines. How is the writing process different for those versus these Midnight Detective books so far?
well, the historical stuff, it maybe helped that I had to know as I go through the story to match it up with actual historical events
Right.
and kind of right around that. So that could be one thing. But Danu's curse took like less than 5 months, and that was during COVID. And I think that really helped because I was, as many people, were like they had a part-time job or they had no job.
Right.
Um, and then we were all in like a Discord group. I think it was 2020, 2021, whichever year that was. Some of us had jobs, but most of us did not. So we were just wallowing in sangria and just screaming out the stress of everything that a lot of us got our books just finished, or they started a book and then it took a few months or 6 months, whatever, to finish a full book. So that might have been different than the other two because the first one, it took like 15 years, didn't know what I was doing. The second book, I wasn't sure about that. It took like 10 years. And then we get to, COVID pandemic and everything shut down. And I get, 5 months. But the sangria and the group wallowing really helped.
Right.
So each one's different, though the standalones are historical based. So there is you need to follow this. And
Right.
I personally do not like mixing up dates or years or historical events that have been written down. I know other writers will do that and then they'll put it in the author's note. Oh, this actually happened in 1900, but I made it 1901 because of, and I don't like doing that.
Oh, right. So you don't like
Um,
fudging stuff up to fit the
yeah,
story.
no. So
You don't like
it
taking
is the
artistic
timeline.
liberties on history.
No, no, no.
Gotcha.
That's not for me. Um, it's fine for other people, though. When I read the author's note, I'm with something like that. I'm like, so I can't really trust that this is historically accurate. I know it says historical fiction, I get it, but I would argue against doing that, and I have, and I haven't recently, and I think that is moving away because that used to be a trend. but I think readers and possibly other writers that are sticking to a timeline are like, why would you move it a year, 6 months, even like 2 months? I've seen it moved just 2 months to fit the story. I'm like, but you can't fit the story to the historical event. I don't, that's
Right.
something I don't understand.
I haven't. Oh, well, that's a lie. I have tackled one historical writing, but a lot of what's fudged up with that is the actual events of certain days early on, because we don't actually know any of that information, and I don't know the setting very much. So that was more taking artistic liberty on the setting rather than the actual time frame. The actual time frame of stuff that happened, I followed very closely. So
Mm-hmm.
I see where you're coming from. I wouldn't want to fudge up dates like that either as a writer. That would bother me
Yeah.
because I like to I have autism, so I obsess over things in terms of just
Mm-hmm.
what a passion type of thing.
Yeah.
So if I'm learning that kind of stuff about anything that I would write about, I'm learning all of the actual history of it, and I would have a very hard time breaking away from that because it just, you know,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense, even though I didn't complete the thought, but that's all well and good. When would you write poetry alongside your standalone novels over the years? Because I know you mentioned that those first couple took a very long time, but you've done a number of poetry collections as well.
Oh, those are completely passion projects. The titles, not really to trend. The book covers, not at all to trend, but I don't like the minimalist, no capitalization or punctuation. So they get reads whenever they want to get reads, basically.
Right.
I have ads for uh like the fourth one, Teal Nostalgia, which is close enough to what people like, but those are not the first or the third chapbooks, but the second and fourth one, especially the fourth one. That was a lot of them really writing out trauma, doing trauma therapy with my therapist.
Oh, that's
Um,
interesting.
so yeah, and so I have a disclaimer for Teal Nostalgia, which is the fourth chapbook and the last one I wrote, and I'm not really thinking of writing other poetry. In the beginning, because there is a lot of very graphic poems in that, and based on personal experience, I was writing it out um, for a trauma exercise. Um, and my therapist knows that I'm a writer, so he suggested this technique of poetry. And by the end of the my trauma therapy, which took quite a few years because we've got to work stuff out. Okay,
Right.
a lot of stuff. I just didn't have the want or the need or inclination to write poetry again, and that has just been like that since what was I created the chapbook. I don't even remember. I know I published it probably like 2020 or 2021. So it's been a bit, but the actual chapbook was finished beforehand. Do I know the details to that? No, it was it was a bit of a interesting situation, and I know I it those sat for a long time, and then I was like, well, here's the thing. I'm not a Amanda Lovelace type of thing, or what are the other ones that are popular that don't do the punctuation and the capitalization,
You
whatever
don't
it is.
do the grammar.
Yeah, I do the grammar, and
Grammar
so, and
writing
I'm not
technique.
sure. Yeah, and I'm not churning out breakup poetry, anything like that, because that wasn't the whole point of the therapy. It was
Right.
childhood trauma.
Right. Yeah. It
So
comes
those
from a
are
different
different.
place.
Yes.
One's a little bit
um,
heavier. One's a little bit more
yeah.
generally relatable.
Yeah. And so but the thought was, are they just going to sit on my computer for the rest of my life? Or do I publish them and people read it if they, want to? It's
Right.
not going to be an in mass type of situation. I get it occasionally, and I get a lot of the three popular times that I will get poetry readers actually reading and not just clicking on my ad and taking up a good 15 cents of my revenue here. It's Valentine's Day, National Poetry Month, and Christmas. And I'm thinking, maybe for Teal Nostalgia, don't give it for a Christmas gift, but that's not me to say. Maybe you're buying it for yourself. Good for
Right.
you. I hope that helps. I have gotten people that have said thank you for publishing it. Um, and I don't mind at all people that say I don't relate to your poetry. I'm glad that you don't, basically.
Right.
Um, I am more concerned, and I'll talk to people if they email me or direct message me wherever, um, about, oh, I related a lot to the poems Until Nostalgia, and thank you for writing it. Well, we're gonna, if they're comfortable, I'll give them some resources of trauma therapy and what that means, and if they have other mental illnesses, I'll give them resources for that, and I'll give them words of advice. And so that, I don't mind that it's not popular or anything, because I get them a couple times a year, but a couple times a year is better than them struggling on their own. And I know, because I am recovered from all my mental illnesses, and I do
Golf clap.
advocacy work. Thank you. I do advocacy work, specifically PTSD and OCD, but you usually have other anxiety disorders, like generalized anxiety
Right.
disorder or social anxiety. So I know stuff for that as well. So I am happy with the decision of putting out to Nostalgia. I'm not gonna write any other poetry. I just am not angsty. I'm not depressed. I'm not angry anymore. And those,
Right.
you can really see that.
Yeah, because I
And but that's different from me, but it was me. It's totally cool now.
okay. I mean that
Yeah.
makes sense because you have the 4 poetry collections. It looks like available for purchase anyway. Is that
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Hmm.
because I have all of them on my wish list. But
Hmm.
I will say, as a book collector, I appreciate the consistency of them, even if they're not all technically related. It doesn't seem like.
Yeah, I wanted to have that look to show these are the 4 chat books, and then the other books are actual novels.
Right.
Um, so because it's all under my given name, and I didn't want to cause any confusion. So they're chat books. That's all poetry, but they're different. Um, Paradise Found is brevity poetry, where it's 1 or 2 sentences of poetry, which used to be popular back when Tumblr was a thing. So that's a little outdated, but
Right.
I think that's my least purchase, because it was really popular, and that brevity 1 sentence 2 sentence poetry is now not a thing anymore.
Well, it is
Still love
the
it.
one of the 4 with the least reviews, but I think it's the
Yeah.
most highly rated. It looks like on Amazon.
Yeah. And then alpha beta poetry, that's not anything related to the trauma therapy. That was an inspiration when I was doing a poetry course at community college, like 2013, and then I published it 2014. And that was create an alliteration poem for each letter of the alphabet, only using that letter.
Yeah, I
And
saw some of the
yeah,
preview stuff or like pictures that people had put in the reviews on that, and I'm like,
yeah,
I don't know enough English for that.
yeah.
I say as I have a much broader vocabulary than most people I know.
Yeah,
So
you would have
props,
to like,
but
yeah, they look that it all does make sense. You just don't have the and a I we those types of things,
well,
unless it's
unless it's
for
A.
the yeah. So, like, yeah, you do have to pull out a dictionary. Like, that's what I did
Thesaurus
when
too,
I wrote them.
probably.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
because doing
so
that
they
and
do.
making it make sense would be
Yeah, it all makes sense. You just don't
bonkers.
have the things that you would think that it would make sense. But definitions, they are all in order, and if you look all of them up, then it would make sense. And then, like, well, X, I think X only has like 5 words. That's a little easier. A, I think that A and yeah, some other ones are longer because you have more
Yeah,
words.
yeah.
So it kind of depends on what's the popular letter.
Probably
Not
the
X or
letters
Z.
that have some conjunctions and stuff like that, or not
Yeah.
conjunctions, whatever they're called. I forget at this
Yeah.
point. I haven't been in English for 4 years or more. Um,
Yeah.
the ones where you have words like and or but
Mhm.
or would probably be a little bit easier as well, because then you have a slight transition to a new thought,
Yeah,
or at least
yeah.
that's
Those are a
how it
bit
would seem
longer.
to be. Uh,
Mhm.
but of your first two books, which one was the first one you published, A Patriot's Tale or The Two Foxes?
A Patriots too.
Okay. And
And then Danu's Curse and then The Two Foxes. But The Two Foxes, I had to rewrite the second half because my editor, Sarah, um, said plot hole, this doesn't make sense. And I was like, ah, shit. So, and she's like, also, doesn't need to be there. It would have been historical fantasy if I didn't listen to her advice and it kept that she could control lightning, but it didn't need to be there. Where does it come from? Who knows? I pants that, okay? So,
came
and she's
up with
like,
that out of nowhere.
yeah, and she's like, yeah, I noticed. Maybe rewrite it. It's up to you, but rewrite it. And I'm like, no, I got it. And so that came third. I already had Danu's Curse fully written, so I just switched. But writing wise, not publishing wise, it was A Patriot's Tale, um, the Two Foxes, and Danu's Curse. I just for things to be clearer when I talk like in videos, I'll switch it up and just kind of not mention that whole story unless someone asks, like, will outright ask, like, what is the actual writing and publication dates? And then I'll go into it. But can you keep up? I don't know. I don't want to create confusion. So it's
Right.
just, yeah,
You just say the ones in the order that they came out. And I mean, I think that's fair
yeah.
too, because if you look at, this is going to be a stark example, but Stephen King, who has a million books out, but one of his earlier novels published, it was, oh, good grief, what's the number? It's probably his fifth novel published in terms of like the year, and that's The Long Walk.
Mm,
But I'm pretty sure it was the first one he actually wrote. So if you try to go
yeah.
by when things were written, you get a little bit more complicated in that regard. But what
Hmm.
is The Two Foxes about? I think that's the only one of your pieces of writing that I don't have some sort of broad idea of at the moment, because I didn't do my research, obviously.
There's a little like, what is it? I don't know. Like, but I can't explain that to people until now. It's historical fiction with a very light fantasy because Sarah uh, is 18 years old, and in Puritan times they marry a little later, like 18 to in their early 20s. So she's still living with her family and her husband. Her father is, of course, very religious. He's also abusive because she questions his authority in the church, and she does not fit in. So they choose a not so great guy for her to marry because they just get rid of her. And that traumatizes her into her magical ability to see into the future. And such happens. She is almost tried and hanged as a witch, so she
Classic.
runs away. Yeah, she runs away and befriends a man named Red Fox, who's part of the Pocumtuck tribe, and they invite her in as a guest. More like she's friends with Red Fox, New Arrow, and Ambush, so that helps. But she's still a guest. She's not with him until like more the end of the novel, or yeah, let's say middle of the novel. They start off as friends, and she helps them in whatever way she can with her visions of the future. And that is a novel that I don't I had a just a random dream, I think 16 or 17, where they meet, and that's how that all started. But it's way different from what it originally was, and not even including Sarah saying redo the second half.
All right.
So, yeah, that one is a little hard as well because it's not straight up historical fiction because she can see into the future, but it's
Right.
not enough fantasy to be classified as maybe not even historical fantasy. So it's like it's one of those passion projects where you didn't do any research whatsoever to make it fit into a good genre.
You know, make it
So it's one of those
marketable.
things where it's like I'm probably gonna have to have like a huge discussion with Faye about it. But are we leaning towards historical fiction? Or are we gonna lean towards like historical fantasy? Because technically yes, but is it enough is it enough fantasy for her just seeing into the future that people of that read fantasy would read it? I don't know. So gonna be a great conversation. I am gonna have to talk to her about it in a couple months and see how that goes. And I might also have to talk to my writing coach about it and say like which way does it lean? Because there are earlier books that are historical fiction that you can also like there's something like they're a witch, so they do potions. They're a witch, so they see into the future or they see ghosts, but it's still historical
Right.
fiction.
It's
I
historical
don't
fiction with a
know.
fantastical element without being a
Yeah,
fantasy story.
yes, that might be it. But that was years ago. I don't see that a lot with historical fiction now, other than like they're witches, but you know that they don't, there's like not magic. They're midwives, which I've seen lately. So, ah, that's an interesting one.
Right. Let's see. What's the one that we haven't covered yet? Is the one that I do actually have a copy of, Danu's Curse. I don't know a
Oh,
whole lot
yeah.
about this one either. I just had added it to my wish list at one point, and I don't remember which friend bought it. I think it was Patrick, because
Oh,
Patrick
yeah.
buys everything for everyone because he's a madman.
Oh, it's very nice. Well, I think him and oh, I don't know. He mentioned read along with other people. I'm like, okay.
I think he made
I
it
don't
like
know.
an idea, but I don't think anything actually formed of it because he mentioned it to me too, and I'm just like, yeah, come back to me in about 15 millennia when I have time.
Yeah, there's a he does a lot of read-alongs, and he's totally good at balancing them, but I don't know if other people
Nobody's as good at
are good
balancing
with
stuff
it.
as Patrick is.
Yeah.
Patrick is more maniacal than even like Aloe is, for example, because Aloe and Minna, I don't know how to
Mhm.
pronounce her name, they join everything, but I think she's also a little bit better at balancing stuff too because she has like three within ebook and physical and audio going on
Mhm.
at any point, so she just kind of like balances between whatever's going on. I don't know how she does it, but Patrick, he just plows through everything. I think he does nothing
Yeah.
besides read. He'll get on his PC and do a report for work once every 15 blue moons, and then he'll go back to reading for the time in between or something like that.
Yeah, it's good to I guess, well, it also is like how fast do you read and comprehend stuff? And
I think
I
he
do,
reads
or
pretty
like how
quick.
yeah, and how big your font is if you're um reading on a tablet. I only do physical books, so I can't increase or decrease that
Same.
font size. Yeah.
I've only
So,
done a handful of digital, and those are like the e-arcs that I've gotten. That's it.
oh yeah. At least my eARC was short. I could imagine you being like, "Oh my god, I can't see anymore." If it's like 100,000 word or more arc. Yeah.
I mean, it's fine. Like the arc that I got for Philip's second book is 200,000 word book,
Oh
and
boy.
it wasn't too bad. I read like the first, I don't know, 2/5 of it on the e-arc before I got my physical edition, so then I finished it physical. Um,
Oh yeah.
but yeah, that's why with even all of your stuff, like I have the physical format added on my wish list because
Hmm.
like you're gonna buy it for me, or if I'm gonna buy it for myself at some point, paperback, please.
Yeah.
Hence
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
And even
Yeah.
like your font in this book is actually pretty large. Like that's
Hmm.
attractive.
Yeah. I like what is I think a Patriot's Tale is 11 font, and then everything else is 12. But it also depends on the font type. So I have a different font for the urban fantasy books, also because they're way shorter. I think it's like 12 point font, and what did I choose? Gourmand? I don't know what I chose. It's in there in my it's in Atticus. It's whatever it is. But I know um the historical fiction ones are either 11 or 12 and a completely different font that starts with a C.
There's a
So
lot of those.
yeah, yeah.
Because let's see, what am I thinking? Oh, I have the physical edition of Obsidian Murders around here somewhere too, but I have no clue where it is. You can probably
Yeah,
see it
they're
on the camera you're
the
looking at. These shelves are a disaster. I haven't organized
uh-huh.
any of these other shelves. I have these three for my camera. Everything else is
Yeah,
a
yeah.
nightmare. Oh, in fact, my main camera can actually see that shelf right here. That's
Hmm.
flattering. I have no clue where Obsidian Murders is. Oh, there it is.
It's a thin book. It could probably be hidden fairly well.
Uh, yeah, I mean, if you compare it even to Danny's Curse,
Yeah.
like, I'm showing it
Yeah,
on
and
my camera.
Danu's Curse is like 68,000 words.
That's
The
not too
two
shabby.
foxes, yeah, the two foxes 63,000, and a Patriot's Tale is like 86,000. I have been decreasing in my word count ever since, not including the chat books because I don't
It,
at
that's
all
different.
matter. Yeah,
Yeah, like, that's
um,
different.
totally different. And I don't totally mind it because for at least with urban fantasy they expect at least two books a year but they want more, but I am not that type of writer, and so you're going to get two books a year and we're going to go short. But
Right.
also it's the subgenre is mystery, so how much are you going to put into that book as a mystery before people like get to the mystery? Okay, I don't care. So I've noticed that mysteries are just like if you're pushing 60,000 words for mysteries, you're going to lose people. So there's also that.
I've never considered that, but mostly because that's nowhere near my genre wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Neither what I read nor what I intend to write. Although there's like a little
Yeah.
bit of, not mystery, there's a little bit of like detective work going on in
Mhm.
sort of this first trilogy. A little bit as like a small side thing for part of the plot, but it's not like a dedicated thing at all, so.
Yeah, mine is like uh urban fantasy detective, but they're solving magical murders and that is the mystery. So you kind of like play. They don't have detective for the subgenre on
Oh, right.
Amazon, so you choose mystery.
Right,
But people
right.
get it, and if they don't get it, then that's why I chose Midnight Detective Agency, because then you understand what the subgenre is, and detective mystery. I did a lot of research
Yeah, there's a
on
lot of
the
thought going into
title.
this.
Yeah, I did a lot of research on the title and the series title. So, and it pays off. Yay. Thank you very
Right,
much. They
right.
know what it is. And I think I was like, well, good, because I spent months doing it. So
Well, I
I
mean,
hope you do.
it has worked out, but like the second book in this, Murderous Fairies, that cover looks sick. Like really sick. I really like the red on it. So I'm looking forward to that whenever
Yeah.
that happens. How far are you into that one, actually? I suppose I should ask.
80, 85%, 80%. I just have to get to the interrogation, and then after that, kind of like wrapping things up, and then they go back to DC. And Murderous Fairies, they're in Santa Fe, New Mexico, because a bunch of dead fairies, yeah, fairies high, have been murdered on a Navajo man's lawn, and he
Oh,
can
that's
see
fun.
fairies, and no one else can in his area. So he was like, "What the? There's
Excuse me.
14 dead fairies. Yeah, there's 14 dead fairies on my lawn. Something's wrong." Because
Right.
the whole thing for the fairies, or just the fae in general, I'm taking it from mainly Celtic and Norse and Germanic myths and legends and all that stuff. They don't have deserts there. So they get their energy from forests, lakes, moss, whatever. And so it's pretty unheard of that there are that many fairies in a desert. So
Right.
that's why it's very weird.
I was
And
gonna
that's
say that
why
setting sounds
Tessa,
cool anyway.
yeah. Yeah, and that's why Tessa and Bloodsworth are called in, because why there's so many dead fairies in the desert, and they have clothing that are like moss or leaves or whatever it is. Well, that they don't have that in Santa Fe. So that's a whole detective work there. Like, why are you here? And obviously, you've been murdered, and there's a whole thing of one side looks a certain way and the other side looks a certain way, and so they're related. And why? Well, you have to find out.
Well, I'll read it whenever
But
it comes out,
oh yes,
assuming my
probably,
schedule's not too busy. I'm getting myself
yeah,
roped into
probably,
too many other projects. Not
yeah.
read-alongs, other projects.
Oh yeah, probably gonna be this like less than 50,000 words again, because really you can only draw out that mystery so much, and I'm
Yeah.
not wanting to draw out a mystery just for word count, and so that's why I'm doing the bare bones writing technique. And whatever draft comes out, I give it to my editor, and I'll ask her, do I need to add anything else to make it make sense? Because this is what I got. But I did that for Danu's Curse and Obsidian Murders, and she said, no, don't add anything to it. You don't need to. So I'm really a person of, it needs to be in there. It's going to be in there, not want. Because there's
Right.
a lot of, I want this to have 15 pages or whatever of cute banter between my MC and the love interest. I don't, does that need to be there? 15 pages? I don't, no. You just want it to be there because
Right.
that's whatever it is. So you could argue, oh, the banter is important to add,
Character context and or development.
yeah, but does it need to be 15 pages?
Probably
I don't
not.
know. Probably not. You could go with
Especially,
5, I don't know,
especially
10.
since 15 pages for you is like 2 chapters. So,
Yeah, I'm just like, whoa, we need that. Or like 5 pages about a description of the house. You lost me. So some people like that.
right.
Great. I go on the doesn't need to be there. Unless the house is like it has I don't know, I am spitballing. It's a spirit. It's alive.
It is
And
an entity within the story.
yes. Yes. That I'd be like, okay, that's needed.
Yeah.
But if you have a bunch of pages of a house with what it looks like and then nothing else happens with it. I forget the writer who said, if you, and I'm paraphrasing, if you describe a gun that is mounted to the wall, that gun needs to be used or else it's useless. I kind of agree with that. It could be like it's either that or you want the aesthetic of it, and if it's only like a line or two about, oh, this guy has a mounted rifle on his wall and he has like a mounted buck on his wall, well, that makes sense, and I don't think you need to use the rifle,
Right.
but so there is like slight agreement, but I still get that it's still a good train of thought. Does it need to be in there because you're going to use it?
Or if it's
Yes or
making a
no?
specific point of a character too, because
Yeah, and
that
that
could
would
fall
be
along the same
needed.
lines. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But
I do
I mean,
not have a rifle on the wall anywhere, but if I did, I would
probably
use
use
it.
it.
Maybe just like hit some, like we take it off. Oh, it's like it's really old. It doesn't have bullets. Whack you. He doesn't have to be shot.
And
'Cause I think
snap it
his
in
was like it
half.
has to be. Yeah, I think his thing was it has to be shot by the end of the book, or else it's useless. You could smack someone against the head with it. That's good enough.
There has to be some
Just
sort of
use it.
utilization, whether that's in the story or for characters. I feel like
Hmm.
a utilization of it is useful, because
Yeah.
that's how my outlining actually works. Kind of going back to outlining and writing is when I did my last novella, I discovered that I was like, oh, I actually do a lot better, and I actually get on the train of actually writing a lot better if I have an outline to work from. So
Hmm.
I had a 3,000 word outline for what ultimately became a 35,000 word novella. And the reason that I liked that so much was because I could go through the process of basically writing an entire first draft without taking the time to spend, writing a first draft. I could go through that, and by the time I got to later scenes in the outline, I could be like, but if this kind of thing is going to happen, or if I plan for something along these lines to happen, maybe I should adjust the way some of these earlier scenes are, and I can do that without having to,
Hmm.
change or edit or delete or add thousands of words or whatever
Yeah.
the case may be. So I just found that a lot easier for myself, and a lot of my foreshadowing comes down, or a lot of my editing and outlining and stuff like that comes down to minute foreshadowing stuff like that, as if like the gun on the wall. I
Hmm.
would point out specific details like that in my outline so that I don't forget to do it later.
Yeah, and then there's also the side of like people analyzing every single sentence of every paragraph in the book. And this is a meme that I also agree with. So I guess I'm in the middle again, where it's like the English teacher points out that the curtains are blue because of the depressing state,
Stereotypical.
and
Yeah,
blah blah
exactly,
blah.
the
And it's like,
stereotypical
no, it's
example.
just fucking blue.
Right.
Like, and I have that. Like, if I choose clothing or whatever to say like that, it's not gonna match what the person's feeling. Like if they're wearing red, that doesn't mean they're I don't know, angry. It's just like for that time the red popped up in my head, so they're gonna wear a red hoodie.
Or maybe the
So
character just looks nice in red.
yeah,
Because that's how people
but
are. I look a
yeah,
lot better in blue than I do in red. Like,
yeah. So and well, like for uh like for example, Bloodsworth, I make fun of the fact that in the second book he chooses a red car, a red rental car. So funny. Okay. But like that's about it. And then he wears black and um like well just like darker colors because he's a punk. Um Tessa wears just whatever, but she does wear leather jackets a lot. But that is more so urban fantasy thing that you like the leather jacket.
right.
Kind of need it, but
But I
that
mean,
doesn't go against her personality or anything.
right. And when you say the name Bloodsworth, for to be fair, the first color that pops in my head is
Yeah,
red. So the fact that you make fun of that specifically is
Yep, and
Fitting.
I also don't have him stereotypical, like really aggressive, or like if he smells blood or look sees it, then he's going into a rage. That's kind of like overdone. I think it's overdone.
I mean, that's
Um,
one of the things I liked about Obsidian Murders was that you were able to use well well known and well used creatures within different, m- many different backgrounds, but they're never like the same as what we normally see. Bloodsworth is not the stereotypical 2000s vampire, but he's not the stereotypical classic vampire. He's no form of stereotypical vampire. So,
yeah,
and it's
like well,
nice for that reason.
I was surprised to learn that Dracula, he could go out in the sun.
Yeah,
He's just
yeah.
weak.
In the original book,
So the
yeah.
whole yeah, so the whole idea that they can never go out into the sun or else they'll just like instantly be set on fire and die like 5 seconds later, that is an interpretation. It's not right or wrong. But what I do for Bloodsworth is there's magical sunscreen, and he puts that shit on all the time. But he can go out into the sun, and if it's winter out, he doesn't need to use it as much. I mean, depending where he is. Um,
Ironic
and
as well because
you know,
a lot of snow on the ground actually makes sunburns and stuff like that worse because of the reflection.
yeah,
In
yeah,
Antarctica,
he
you can't
doesn't.
go out without absurd amounts of coverage and or sunscreen because you'll just
Oh yeah,
die.
he's not going to Antarctica.
Oh,
But
come on.
nah, but he still puts it on, but he's not
Right.
lathering himself in it. And what is explained is like it's first degree burns, second degree burns, third degree burns, and then he dies from the burns. And you could, you know, he doesn't disintegrate into ash either. So it looks pretty human. Vampires used to be human, so I was going for the fact of okay, so what would be like a natural-ish death, burned alive, though I do mention, Tessa mentions, that it's usually smoke inhalation that kills you first. But at least it's okay, well, like a medical examiner was like, well, he's he's burned like to a crisp. That's third degree burns. Okay, there's no smoke inhalation. Like you can kind of logically get out of that for a human if they were to find his dead body. Rest in
Right.
peace if he dies. But it's kind of the same with werewolves, but for the werewolf pack that I have, it is on the full moon. It's not you can shapeshift every time. That's a shapeshifter. That's not a werewolf. But they can also die by like getting shot in the heart or the face without a silver bullet or not. So it's like a pick and choose of what I think makes sense.
Right.
Because it
Just
could
kind of
make
having
sense to
fun
other
with it.
people. Yeah, it could make sense to other people that like the day before and the day after of a full moon they can turn. I get that logic. I just chose, one day full moon. So, because
I mean, it makes
Buffy
it
the
simpler.
Vampire Slayer, yeah, Buffy the Vampire Slayer does with Oz, like, is it 3 days or 5 days, something like around the full moon, and they lock him up and he turns and all that stuff. I think it's a great interpretation. But when people talk about Twilight and that whole thing, they're not werewolves. They're shapeshifters because they can turn at any time and it
Oh,
doesn't
right.
matter. So technically, she got it wrong, just like she
Well,
gets a lot of stuff wrong. But
she
that's her
got a lot of stuff.
interpretation.
She's the
Go
reason
for it. You're
vampires had a
making
second, yeah,
billions.
a
Oh
second
yeah.
form of stereotype. Yeah.
Hmm.
How many books are you planning for Midnight Detective Agency to be? I've heard you throw
Six.
around the number 6.
Yeah, six. Um, and I mean, if it does really well, add to it. But I already have a character for the third book that is going to be a spin-off, and I might or might not add in Tessa Bloodsworth to that. But that one, it would be a trilogy, and it's Grace, who is half elf and half human, and she's a uh, basically a mob boss in DC. But it's underground leaning. She doesn't actually interact with the mob bosses that are human, so it's a underground mob boss for elves. So, because we have the whole thing of only certain people know that other beings exist,
Right.
which is, I get that from personal experience because I grew up with a spiritual science minister who was my grandmother, and she was more into neo-paganism than the other religions, but she knew all about the other religions, and she could marry you in any religion because she went to like these special schools in DC. I don't think it's still around anymore, but it was the neo-pagan was preferred, and we knew a lot of Wiccans, and at one point she was part of a coven, so that's why they're involved and they all know, because that's part of the neo-paganism beliefs and
Right.
part of Wiccan religion. So then everyone else, I mean, there are people like in later books like Alex and Nina who are together, and Tessa's friend, they believe in ghosts, but they don't believe in fairies and mermaids. So like there's different levels, and what you see in
In
real
the
life
real world,
anyway.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
You have a lot of people who believe in ghosts or some other form of spiritual entities, but don't believe in like outright demons, for example,
Yeah.
even though a lot of people would say they're the same thing or they're very closely
Hmm.
related. So you get a lot of spectrum there.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's really like for the my world in urban fantasy is just pretend that there are like elves walking around, that's or like, there's mermaids in the nearby ocean, or what a river, like it's kind of like that, because that's what neo-pagans and Wiccans basically believe, but they're not corporeal, so they're not in on this physical realm, and there's another dimension, which is the other world, and they go back and forth through, some people say portals, some people say they just like pop up, whatever, just
Right.
depends on what you believe. I included portals because that makes a little more sense.
Well, it
And
provides
they
a
go
little
back
bit
and
of
forth.
tangible
Yeah.
mechanic, so to speak,
Yeah.
for its existence, I say. Um,
Yeah.
let's see. Some other questions that I want to ask you are, who are some of your favorite or most influential like authors and or poets for some of the writing that you've done? You can pick like specific books or stories or authors generally if you want, but I'm curious to know where some of your background comes from there.
Yeah, I don't really have any favorite poets other than William Shakespeare and his sonnets, but I don't write sonnets.
Well, I wanted to
So,
try doing sonnets and some other form of like actual
yeah,
technical poetry, uh, just to
I
give it a
have,
shot, but
yeah, I have that one. Uh, I don't remember. The poem "Until Nostalgia" "Adhere" is it has to, and that kind of is some kind of similar to the alliteration, where it's like you start with A and you go all the way to Z. So it's the alphabet down. Um, and that was an assignment for the poetry class in college that I did. I don't know if the poetry professor made that up, or if that's a legit type of poem.
I would
I've
think
seen
it's
it
probably
before.
a type of poem in that case, because there's
Yeah.
plenty of types of poems that are like one person ever has done this specific thing and it became a type of poem,
Yeah. Yeah.
and nobody's ever done another one that anybody ever thought was notable, but it's still a type of poetry.
Yeah, and I don't remember the term or anything, but it's like you have to start the next sentence with the alphabet. and that includes the XYZ. Well, Y is easy because you could do like your or something, but good luck with X and Z. But I did do it, and it made sense, and I got an A. So, boom. For I don't often read poetry. I used to a long time ago when I was angsty Nicole. I so I but even then I was just reading a lot of poetry and I didn't have a favorite. The author that is my all-time favorite and an inspiration is Morgan Llewellyn, who used to be very popular in the late 70s up to like the early 20th century, no, like the 2000s. I would say like
She's the one we have an
early
emote
2000s.
of in the server, right?
Yes.
Okay, then I know who
Yeah.
you're thinking of.
She focuses on mainly Irish, but she also did a book about Wales. So Celtic author, uh, and it's either just straight up Irish historical fiction or she'll do Irish historical fantasy. But the cool thing about Irish everything is that we like it's understood clearly that there are myths and legends and that the god and goddesses or the fae or whatever aren't real, though that can be contested about the fairies. But they're not real, but they're part of the Irish culture and history that you can include it, and it's fantasy, but it's not. It's an interesting like a dynamic that it's kind of hard in some ways to explain. But if you're like a Celtophile, which is like you love all things Celtic, and she became very popular because that was a huge thing during like the late 70s, 80s, 90s, and a little early into 2000s. You just gobble everything up, and you kind of um, you it's an acceptance of, oh yeah, there's goddesses in here, there's fairies in this particular book. They're real, but they're not real.
Right, right.
uh,
Real in the
that's
culture, but not
yeah,
necessarily. Yeah.
yeah, and that's the same for Danu's Curse. So that leans more heavily for fantasy, but it's historical fantasy because there are um, I base the goddesses and the gods off of what we kind of sort of know because the Celts didn't, and specifically the Irish, they didn't write things down, so things get muddy. And what we know is what we know, but it didn't really work out that way for them. But you didn't write it down, so
Right.
here we are.
Meanwhile, there are some other cultures and mythologies, let's say, that have too much written down, and then you have multiple different versions of everything,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
is
which is
its own
fun.
curse, but is
And
also kind of
yeah.
fun because then you know, can utilize any side of it, so to speak, to have something interesting. Um, I haven't read much poetry myself either, but I did. It's funny that I'm mentioning this because this is also something we did. We both decided to wear Edgar
uh
Allan Poe shirts.
oh
Um,
yeah.
I
Ah,
earlier this year I read all of his poetry and then picked out like 25 or something, maybe just 20. I
mhm.
don't remember poems that I initially noted down that I thought were memorable or that I thought were good. And actually, next Thursday, at the time of this discussion's release, is when my top 10 Edgar Allan Poe poems video comes out.
Mhm.
So that'll be interesting. I because I have no authority on poetry, just what I thought was nice to read.
Well, that's literature in a nutshell, I would say. I used
That's
to
fair.
like for like English major, like I had to analyze the hell out of everything and back it up, of course, with peer reviews and
Classic.
stuff. But
Yeah.
it's like even those peer reviews, it's an opinion. Like you're arguing, let's say, I don't even know, that Hamlet became crazy, but he wasn't crazy in the not Hamlet. no, Hamlet. Okay,
Yeah, I was like
that
Hamlet.
in the
Yeah,
beginning, Hamlet wasn't crazy, but then he became crazy. But then you have another opinion where it's like he was never crazy and he's pretending to be crazy, and then you have another opinion, blah, 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 but you're taking text and kind
to
of
kind of support the
formulating that.
theory.
Yeah, and then also with the peer reviews, you're choosing the peer reviews that support your theory until you get to the section of where you,
Counterclaims.
yeah, and then okay, then you include that. But like you have that line in your first paragraph at the end saying this is my theory, and then I'm going through it.
Right.
That's what it is for English literature. So, and I did that for so long. I did it for 4 years, and so I really do get the whole literature is subjective because I had to do it for how many books for a grade.
Right.
I don't know, like
That's the kind of material that I would
probably,
hate doing because,
yeah,
I review books, but all of that is obviously just my opinion. And I
yeah,
analyze things from my own position or from how I experienced it, including a book that has become a meme that I didn't like, being the Bird Book, The Obscene Bird of Night by Jose Donoso.
mm-hmm,
I really liked part one, hated part two, didn't like part three.
yeah,
But where my opinion comes in from that was my experience with the book, and trying to formulate essays and stuff like that on that kind of thing is a lot different than simply reviewing a book.
mhm.
Yeah, so
Yeah. You can like, I probably did, I don't know, 80, 100. I lost count. I don't even want to know how many essays I did.
right,
Doing all that analytical, like just tearing stuff apart and then putting it together. And then here are like my 45 uh, peer review cited MLA format in the back of my 35-page essay. And
right.
I just did a bachelor's degree. Yeah. I mean,
Interpretive analysis is a lot
same
more
thing.
fun to have just in a discussion, like with
Yeah.
people. If you're,
I
you
like
know,
that.
bouncing ideas off each other, going back and forth between two different ideas
Mhm.
of like an interpretation of a work is a heck of a lot more interesting than write about what you think this is about and include sources. It's like, really, can't we just talk about it and have a fun time? Like,
Yeah. And I like it depends on like what you want to do. Like some people love doing that if they have more analytical mind. That's great. I got sick of it, and for like 6 months after I graduated with that BA, I did not read because I was stuck in analyzing every single sentence because I want to pass the class. But it was just
getting out of
like
that
drilled
mode.
into me. Yeah. And it kind of ruined it a little bit. And I also hear writers that like there are certain beats, for example, for romance. I don't read romance, I don't write romance, but there are certain beats that it's reader expectation and you have to hit them unless you want, like 1 or 2 star reviews. So some people, some writers, I would say, some writers do not like, they just love romance and they will write the romance and the beats don't ruin it. Whereas there are other writers that know all the beats that you have to hit and then they just can't read or can't consume anything romance because they know what it has to be to hit that genre and hit that expectation. I get both sides.
Right,
Um,
right.
I know like the basic beats of romance, but I mean it's pretty much the same for like most genres. I can't, maybe satire and humor might not have those specific beats that are reader expectations. I don't know.
Yeah,
Um Maybe satire is a little better because, but there's also like the subgenre of the satire that you kind of have to work in.
right.
So, and
Satire is
that's the
also
same
a little
for,
bit more generalized as well because a lot of that,
yeah.
I, to me at least, who hasn't read much, if any, technical satire seems more to me like something that's like your reader is either going to click with it or they're not. So it's less about the
Yeah.
reader expectations of the formula, it's about the actual stylistic decisions in the first place, but maybe.
Yeah, yeah. Because well, Chandler Morrison is satire, but it's also splatterpunk. So you're going for the beats of splatterpunk, but also satire. So I think it really depends. But the majority of genres, there are expectations, and if
Right,
you don't meet them, then you're going to get poo-pooed
right,
on.
right.
Or people aren't going to read it. Like, for the Two Foxes, that's a passion project. But I don't think I wouldn't have written it if it didn't include Seen into the Future, because then like there's no story without it, how I wrote it. So, you have
That's the
also those
main
things of
narrative
like,
device.
yeah, so like what not all the books fit into comfortably into it, but then, you also have to know as a writer, maybe it's going to be an uphill battle.
Right.
But are you going to publish it? You work very hard on it. But, you know, if you do publish it, you say yes, okay, publishing it, uphill battle. The Two Foxes is uphill battle. I'm
Right.
not saying that it's badly written or anything like that, but I mixed two genres, but I did the fantasy so light that, like, where do you put it? I could have gone more into maybe she um can tell other people's emotions, like make her more psychic, then it would
Right.
fit a little better, but I didn't. And that kind of is the same for other things. Um, Especially like newer writers where they do like a bunch of genres, maybe like 4 genres in a book, and you're like, well, I don't know where to place it, but I had to write the book. I'm like, I know it's gonna be an uphill battle.
Right.
But if you want to put the money in it, and maybe you're not going to ever break even, or maybe you're gonna break even and make a profit, maybe, in like 5, 10 years, what's your choice? You have a lot of choice, but you got to make that choice of
Is
kind
it
of
worth it?
accepting at first. Yeah. Is it worth it, and accepting that it's going to be an uphill battle to market it, or just have people even know what it's about, not even just the marketing about it. Because if a reader does not understand within like the first 10 seconds, no, they're going to keep going. And that's kind of where I'm going with the new cover for the Two Foxes, because they're people get shifter vibes. I'm like, oh, that is not a shifter book. Please don't think that it is a shifter book. Not at all. But yeah, the trials and tribulations of publishing.
Right. Is that anything that you ever think about, like when you're actually writing a story? Like when you were writing the Two Foxes at first, were you thinking about that when you were adding that seeing into the future element in the story?
No, and that's why it's a passion project, because it's
Fair
a
enough.
little too confusing for the reader on how I market it. When people read it, they like it or they love it. It's not like, oh, this is trash.
Right.
But
This is a useless
it's just
combination of
hard.
stupid stuff or anything like that. They don't
Yeah,
do
it's
that.
not like it makes sense, or else Sarah, my editor, would be like, no. And she did. She said, second half with that lightning, get rid of it. No,
Right.
makes sense. So I listened, and I think the book is better um, than it was, and I appreciate that honesty. But it was not, oh, this is bad. Don't even. I'm not even going to touch it. It was, yeah, fix this, and then come back to me. Oh, this is great. Thank you so much. You can publish it if you want to. And sometimes there are people that go through the editing process, and there's just like too much to fix. So then they don't go forward with that book, and then they do other books that make more sense in varying ways. That's up to you. That is
Right.
really up to you.
The example that I think of off the top of my head when you actually say that, like it's not all going to fit, is actually the original version of The Way of Kings, the first book in the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson.
Mhm.
400,000 word book. Um, the
Oh
first
boy.
version of that story had a lot more to it, so that by the time the
Hmm.
book was done, it hadn't done basically anything at
Hmm.
all. And it's already a slow enough book as is, even for people who like it, it's a little bit of a slower uphill climb. It's one of those like you're investing your time into it, according to the people who've read it, because I haven't read it yet. But
Mhm.
that's the idea that I come up with is like, okay, well, he had to put that away for basically a decade. And then when he came back to it, he had to completely restructure and do everything so that it would actually do something. Because
Yeah.
I think some people, well, I know that a lot of authors will make the advice. It's just like, okay, well, if you have good ideas, use your good ideas in your book because you don't know if you'll get to use those later. Like, don't save good ideas for later. But for me, in certain circumstances, it's also like you should use them, but I think some people just use too many at once. And then it just kind of
Yeah. Yeah,
confuses
like
or bloats the story.
you're packing in way too much. And it's like, oh, this might be like, do you need a sci-fi horror mystery with a little bit of fantasy elements? I don't know. I don't think, me personally, I don't think so.
Right.
But you pack it in.
Oh, but then again,
Uh,
you're also a much bigger fan of shorter works, compared to,
yeah.
say, me, for example.
Yeah, it's like it would
That
be
sort
like,
of affects things from a reader's perspective.
yeah, when you have like multi-genre books, the advice is really okay, so what's the main one? So okay,
Right.
it's sci-fi, and then you have the other ones, but you market it as sci-fi, but then you also, and like in the blurb and the categories and just everywhere you also include those other three genres. But um really, my advice to writers is, what are your goals? Because it can get really hard really fast if you're doing something that is not at all the trend or the beats. And I say trend as in like not really necessarily like what's trending, but like what is expected of, for example, romance. You can't have a bad ending for romance because it has to be a happily ever after to qualify as romance. You're not going to change that. You can do romantic fiction like what Nicholas Sparks does and be very successful. But you have to know what is going on in the genre. You can't just go, like it's all romance, but they break up at the end. It's not romance then.
Right.
So
I think that's
what
kind of
do
a
you
technicality though,
want?
because I think readers would still call Nicholas Sparks romance.
Well, he's uh romantic fiction.
Yeah.
And there are
Yeah.
like the Notebook that could be argued as romance, but they die at the end. So it's sad. So
Right.
he falls into romantic fiction because yeah, it's not a happily ever after. So you do have to also do market research, which then people freak out about, oh my God, marketing. It's more about like, yeah, there are things that go in there and the things that don't, but do you want to do that? You don't have to. Are you going to make millions of dollars? No,
Well, to be fair,
probably not.
very few authors are going to make that much anyway.
Yes. Yeah. Also, that goal. Do you want to be a millionaire writing? Okay, so right there, that you're going to be a millionaire writing off the bat. Okay,
Right.
even if you do 100% to market book, uh, it's like
Especially
1%.
nowadays,
Yeah,
whether you're
you
self-publishing
could.
or trad publishing.
Yeah, you could go into that 1% that millionaires. I've seen it happen like twice. 1%. Okay. You can make six figures though. I see quite a few six-figure authors, but those are like the top three, like romance, fantasy, and what's the other top three? Top three, not sci-fi. There's another one that's top three specifically for indie. Now you could definitely make six figures. I know a lot of people because I'm in Brian Cohen's ad school that do make six figures or they make five. Some of them are making seven figures, and they're just churning out books. It also helps like how fast of a writer are you?
Right.
Uh, what what's the genre that you're writing in? Like, oh yeah, you could make quite nice money with the romance, but you can't focus on getting the bank if you don't like even reading romance, much less writing it, because then
Right.
they can tell. Even if it's 100% to market, every single beat is exactly there on point. You outline the crap out of it. Like it, you have all the things that, yeah, if you just do it for money, they can tell, and you're going to get 1 and 2 stars because the romance readers are reading it for a reason. They want to escape. They're hopeless romantics. They want a happy ending. They want to feel good.
Right.
And I totally understand. I don't really read romance all that much. I understand, wanting to have a writer that also enjoys it. Because the ones that are successful, they love romance. They're reading so much romance. They love it. You can tell that they love it as they're writing their own books and they're churning out books left and right. Those are the ones that are, 7-figure authors.
I mean, I could say the
Um,
same thing for fantasy too, as
oh
somebody
yeah, you
who's
gotta love it.
yeah, because what I'm writing is a lot more fantasy oriented. Uh, the simple way to put it is like it's fantasy, but if we got into details, it'd be a little bit more complicated than that, obviously. But I really enjoy reading the fantasy that I've been reading.
Hmm.
Like, I actually have 2 examples right here. Wheel of Time, which is the big one, the one that I'm
Hmm.
sure that if you read, you would hate it, just based off of length. The fact that you didn't like love Fellowship of the Rings means that you would probably not like Eye of the World at all. Um,
Well, like the whole oh no, because I was talking to Bookish Kaz, and I was like, the traveling with the hobbits unnecessary. No wonder Peter Jackson cut out like 90% of the travel with the hobbits, because why? And Kaz was like, yeah, no, that's not just you. That's like a huge point of the negatives for a lot of people.
yeah, most people who don't
Why?
like Lord of the Rings and Fellowship more specifically are Tom Bombadil and or the traveling. That's basically it. Well, and you know, being too detailed and like the grass and the trees are green and stuff, but there's really not that much of it in that book compared to most
No.
other fantasy that I've read. And I haven't read that much fantasy, but it's also thematic in Lord of the Rings. So
Yeah, I didn't like. Yeah, the Hobbit traveling. Okay, great. But that's not an uncommon argument to say like, oh, I didn't like compared to the other two fellowships down. There's always traveling. I get it, but then like you um what are they traveling to is important, and how long it takes. Yes, the hobbits are traveling to a certain place, but does it need to be half of the book? That's the problem
that's where you and
for
me
a
are going
lot
to
of
diverge a
people.
little bit in opinion, just generally,
Yeah.
because like I briefly mentioned earlier, you tend to be a fan of much shorter fiction, broadly speaking. The basically everything that I've read this year is 200,000 plus words.
Yeah, well, there's also, what book did he say? There's like, well, I guess it's also it's a trend. Would it be a trend? It's not an expectation. It's not a beat. I'm gonna go with trend of traveling in fantasy, and that started with Tolkien.
Right.
So you have a lot of traveling happening, and that would be a trend. It's not a beat of fantasy, because not all fantasy has that traveling aspect, but it's
But
really
most of it does,
popular.
especially in the beginning.
Yeah,
Yeah. Um,
yeah, it's popular. It's not like absolutely needed, so that's why it's not considered a beat. But it's, I guess it would also count as a um, the traveling, because it's not in like has to be in there. And I totally get why, because Tolkien started that whole thing. Because in the past it was like myths and legends
well, and
as like
Sword and
the
Sorcery
fantasy.
was fantasy for
Yeah,
a long time too, and Sword and
yeah.
Sorcery is notable for being very short. Like they're short
Hmm.
stories 99% of the time.
Yeah. Well, I know, well, like short now, sword and sorcery under fantasy and like pops up in like all of the uh, little genre breakdowns in Amazon, but it's now its own thing, and yeah, it is shorter. Um, but I've never read a sword and sorcery thing. I don't think I have. So I don't know much about that.
I don't either, beyond the
Yeah.
fact that it's short, and things like Conan the Barbarian is the notable
Oh.
example of that sword and sorcery is Conan. Um,
Oh. Yeah,
but
I didn't even think that would be sword and sorcery because I'm thinking sorcery wizards.
oh right.
Not necessarily. I guess it includes magic. Duh. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
yeah. And that's when
mm,
I can't remember. It was in Mike's server at one point a few months ago when one guy was asking for sword and sorcery recommendations and people were giving it to him and he was confused because he thought that general like epic fantasy that happens to have swords and
yeah.
sorcery was sword and sorcery
Hmm.
and it's like not quite.
Yeah, no, yeah, there are specific things that need to be in sword and sorcery, else it does not count.
And
Yeah,
usually it's
that's kind
very
of
short. Epic
yeah,
fantasy is not quite
yeah.
sword and sorcery.
Epic fantasy is it has to be like I've seen minimum 95,000 though people are just like oh bump it up to 100,000
Yeah.
words. Yeah, that is an expectation. That is
That too. If you're
that
reading
needs
epic
to be
fantasy,
there.
yeah, if you're
Yeah.
reading epic fantasy, you're reading a long and epic story with a
Oh
lot of
yeah.
storylines, usually most of the time a lot of POVs, and generally a
Hmm.
grand scale to kind of battle and conflict. And
Yeah.
that's where
So.
what I'm gonna try to do with my stuff is epic fantasy, but my goal for word count wise is like if I can get above 100,000 words, perfect. That's what I want. But I prefer not to go above 150,000 words. I don't want
Hmm.
250,000 word books like that, or that's 400,000 words. Uh,
Oh
no,
boy.
I don't want to write that. So for me, it's like being a little bit on the shorter end, but I think part of my writing motivation as well comes from, and this might be a little strange when I'm explaining it, but being somewhat of a bridge between fantasy for younger audiences. Not necessarily
Hmm.
YA specifically, but fantasy that is more approachable for a younger audience, being a bridge from that into a more typical adult epic fantasy that's longer. Because
Hmm.
my prose isn't incredible the way that Tolkien's prose is. Like, I adore Tolkien's prose, like a lot of people do.
Well, we took quite a big step in the second lag, so we're gonna we're gonna call that as a positive.
Yeah, pretty much. Just
That's
came
totally
back.
nice.
Yeah, so I think you went out while I was in the middle of that sentence, but that's fine.
No, I saw, I heard to the end. See, like you froze and I didn't, so I heard it all, but I guess I froze. I don't get technology and the lag and whatever, but I heard it all.
That's
So
good, I
there we
guess.
go.
Yeah, because you were the one that
Yeah.
froze for me. So, oh well. But yeah, my general point was I kind of want to be a bridge where I'm not writing the super incredibly long stuff, but it's
Hmm.
approachable for younger audiences, but doesn't necessarily shy away from some adult stuff as well. You know,
Yeah.
far from grim dark type stuff. I don't want to be dark and like, gritty. I just
Yeah.
want to be able to tackle relatively adult topics and themes in a format that's
Hmm.
approachable for younger fantasy readers who want to get into the genre. That's kind of where I'm going for because I think that's best I'm going to get.
Yeah. Well, then there's like a big want for fantasy that's not um, like 200,000 words, but also still epic, but not like advanced. Like you need to read a lot of epic fantasy, but do you totally understand all that? Not maybe, maybe not. And then you keep going, and maybe you're not interested in epic fantasy anymore because it's just a lot. I've
Right.
seen that happen. That was kind of well, I understood the epic fantasy. I'm just like, but why am I reading a 200,000 word book? I could read like depending on the book, like 3 to 6 other books within that time frame and still get 200K. So that's where I was going with. Also, big TBR. Got to get through that. And yeah, that means shying away from the really epic fantasy and getting to like 6 different books.
Right.
And then, okay, sit down. 200 to go, but at least we're not at 206 anymore.
That's what April was for me this month because, well, in April and May, I read like the first book in Philip's trilogy, which was actually fairly short, all things considered. 165,000 words is not 250,000 words. But basically, everything else I read was YA and middle grade stuff. So, like, I read like 9 books that month compared to the 3 or less of basically every other month. Because a lot of what I read is way long.
Yeah, it's totally like it also like reading goals. What's your reading goal? It's going to be different for everyone else. Some people don't mind reading 1 book per month. Some just want to read, they have like, 5 books right now, and they keep adding to that list, but they're like middle grade books, so they can finish it basically in a day. It just depends what you want to do. I know a lot of people are obsessed over that Goodreads reading goal challenge, but also like you do set it.
Right.
So you're kind of making that up for yourself.
I change mine all the time, actually.
Yeah.
I think last year I changed it 2 times, and this year I've changed it at least once, and I'm debating changing it again.
Yeah.
Because for me, when it comes to reading goals and especially like reading achievements, I find book count and page count both to be extremely arbitrary. Because you can read 50 middle grade books, and that's a lot different than 50 epic fantasy books. The person who did the former read the same amount of book as the latter, but completely different, experiences, and it's the same thing on page count. You could read Wheel of Time all in hardcovers and read several, like a few thousand pages less than if you read them on mass market, but you've read the exact same content, so page count doesn't work either.
Yeah, I don't even go by page count, though I guess Goodreads tracks that. I'm like, I don't know. Like, I'm just going by how many books, but then like even then if I read like a short story and it's on Goodreads, I'm counting it. But I know there's people that say like it's not a book. I'm like, it's on Goodreads, so I'm gonna count it. Thank you very much. Or some people don't think like a chat book should count. Well, maybe it doesn't count for you, but I count it. Or I know the whole thing of graphic novels and comic books are not real books. Okay, well, that's your opinion. But if you read I rather someone read graphic books and comic books and short stories and poetry, I don't know, whatever other things people think don't count, than not reading at all. And that is, I think it comes down to, do you want people to read more? Because there has been a decrease in reading steadily, and the reading comprehension is way down, and the reading levels are way down.
I'm a Zoomer. You don't need to tell me that.
Yeah. We want more people to read the books, and that includes the books that you might not think count as books, to just try to level out this situation going on with the reading levels and the reading comprehension.
Yeah, I largely agree, because like I would rather have somebody read what were they called? I think one of them's called not Thunderstruck. It's something along those lines, and then the one that the author's really known for is The Invention of Hugo Cabret, I think, and it's all pictures. Like there's basically no words. The only words that are in those books are the ones that are within the pictures themselves. But otherwise it's all visual. And I loved those when I read them, and I was actually thinking about that the other day. Like I should buy those and read them again, but like I would count that.
Yeah. I think because also we're talking about what you define as literature and then what is a story. Oral has been around for like thousands of years. You're telling a story. It's not written down, therefore it's not a book.
Much
But
literature
you're
was
still,
oral
yeah,
exclusively. There's a
you're
reason,
still getting that story in there. And
right?
so the same for audiobooks. And there are a lot of, like, because I ran a tutoring center quite a few years ago, and I was the go-to for reading recommendations and how to get kids and teenagers to go get into reading or stay interested in reading. And I also worked with a lot of kids with ADHD or ADD, and the only things that they could read were uh, graphic novels, very short books, or comic books. And then some of them couldn't even do that. So then it was audiobooks. But they will sit down and they will listen to that audiobook. I rather have that than them not read at all.
Right.
And they have no interest in storytelling whatsoever, other than like film, different thing though. And so then the reading comprehension just drops. And because you have to comprehend what's being told to you. And I think it's a little bit more um, not natural, used to listening to stuff because we are also talking all the time to each other. And when you have someone that has ADD or ADHD, and even the medication is not enough to get them to sit down and read a book, that's better, way better than them having nothing involved in literature or even
Right.
capital L literature.
Yeah, you're
So
not
that
getting
was
those types of
always,
kids into capital L literature.
oh no,
I
they
mean,
listen
unless,
to audiobooks. Yeah.
yeah,
They just can't sit down and read that stuff. And I totally get it. I have ADD. I can sit down and read. I could not, like a paperback, I could not listen to an audiobook. So it really depends on the person. So it's always going to be different. I'm not going to assume that every kid with ADD or ADHD
right.
has to read an audiobook. And though I had this conversation a few times with parents that were like, I need them to read a chapter book. I need them. And I was like, but why?
Why
Because
do you
they're
need them
already,
to?
yeah, because they're in fifth grade, but they're also still, like bordering on third grade, fourth grade level. We're going to go to we're still going for like children's picture books where they had like those pictures in there, and like it's shorter. We're going to aim for that, and then building the confidence, and we're going to also see if they can even pay attention to those books that have the pictures in them, but they still count as chapter books, um, like Judy Blume type of those books. And then, we'll just see how it goes. You can't just throw freaking books at them and be like, read that book. Like, you're not making anything better. I'm
Right.
sorry to say. I know where you're coming from,
And sometimes doing that
but
actually
it's not
just kind of
helping.
pushes people away from reading in general.
Yes, yeah, that's why I would sit down with every child and say, what's your favorite movie? What do you like to do? And then I would base their answers on what they love. And a lot of them were like, I love unicorn. I'm like, I have a lot of unicorn books for you. And it was just all unicorn books. And they were like, I read them all this week. I love you. Give me more. And I'm like, I love it. I'll give you more unicorn books. And that's how you get the
Right.
interest. And you do have to do like a lower level. But then when they get better, because they keep reading, you up that level, the reading level. And then they're on level or they're above level for their grade. And we're just like, this is how you do it, not throw books at them and say, this, what you're doing over here doesn't count. I want you to read, I don't even know what, like It by Stephen King when you're in like fifth grade. They, yeah, the parents had like interesting ideas of what kids should be reading and also how to get them there. But there was a preteen, started out lower grade level, got to grade level, and he was like, I'm going to read Stephen King's It. I'm like, okay. Did does do your parents know about that? He's like, yes, they were really excited. I'm like, okay, because there's some stuff in
Right. Yeah,
it that
there's
is
some
not.
stuff. There's the scene
There's some
too.
stuff. Yeah, and so I was like, okay, yeah, you if you need any help with that, you want to talk stuff out. I haven't read it, but I can listen to you. We can
Right.
maybe spark notes it or something. I don't know. And he was struggling with it because that's a chunky book,
It's long.
but yeah, he got it done 6 months, and he was so proud.
How old
And
was he?
that's like 13, 14.
That's not bad at
He was there for a
all.
while.
Like
No,
like if that's what it takes to get through that book,
yeah,
perfectly fine. Like obviously there are some lunatics that get through books that big in like a month,
yeah,
but there are also
yeah.
people who, gotta take it slow. The first time that I actually started reading it, I got
Hmm.
through 300 pages out of the 1100 in the mass market edition that I had, but that flew by, and then I just didn't finish it because that was how I was for a lot of like 7th grade through junior year, basically. Uh, well, probably sophomore year because that was when I basically stopped reading in general.
Yeah.
But I DNF'd unintentionally a lot of things.
Hmm.
I just never
Yeah.
finished. I was also, I'm far, naturally, I'm far too prone to being a mood reader, and therefore I just pick stuff up. It's just like, well, that's cool. But then I never finish because I have about 15 different books that I'm reading, and then I never finish them.
Mhm.
So I might finish
Yeah.
one or two out of every 10 I pick up, even if I'm enjoying all of them. So that's why nowadays I'm like, the fact that I currently have 5 books right now kills me. I'm dying. Like, because I know it's going to be a problem, and it is a problem.
Yeah, there's like things that you wouldn't think of that would help that you just like have to discover. I can read multiple books at the same time and it all still makes sense. Like, so, and then there's some people like I need to read one book at a time or else I mix it up. That's just something that just depends on the individual, and that doesn't mean it's right or wrong or anything's wrong with you
Right.
personally. And that's also something that kind of comes up with reading in general. Like there are just some ways that it's not going to work for you. That's fine.
Yeah, for me, it's generally it's less about mixing things up. It's more about having too many things going on and inevitably not coming
Hmm.
back to one of them.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So for me, what's worked is like if I structure my reading, if I basically know ahead of time what I'm going to be doing, even if it's something like this month where it's like, okay, well, I just got the copy of Return to Adan from Philip. He sent that to me. I know ahead of time, like, okay, I'm going to start that, even though I have like 4 other books that I'm going through right now, but I made that plan. But for me, it's like if I structure my TBR, and especially if I have less books to immediately read, then I can manage it a lot easier without getting lost in the maze of
Yeah.
too many things that I'm currently reading. Loss of
Yeah,
balancing my time.
yeah, the lost or just the maze of books and reading. Sometimes it's fun to get lost in it, but other times you're like, what did I do to myself? I need to get out.
That's what I was thinking when I looked at my nightstand last night. I was like, there is 5 books there. Uh,
Yeah,
why?
I think I just started. Uh, oh crap, what is it? It's a nonfiction book. I didn't know it was that chunky. I'm just, but
That
it's
happens too sometimes.
called. Yeah, I was like, oh, that's big. Okay, I didn't know that. Paddywhacked: The Untold Story of the Irish American Gangster by T.J. English. I don't know when I'm gonna finish that, but I mean, it's as of right now as we're filming, it's September 10th. I think I could finish it by October, but I have, I don't know, like 10, 15. It's big for spooky, scary skeleton season. And I know if I don't get Paddywhack finish, well, it's gonna wait.
Dude, that
So
is what I was thinking about too. I'm thinking about October, and I'm like, I'm less stressed about getting what reading done I can this month because I know what like needs to be done. I'm more worried about figuring out next month. Because what I don't
I
finish this month inevitably carries over in October, but I also
yeah.
have whatever I'm going to read in October. I have my 3 Stephen Graham Jones books that
Hmm.
I need to get through because I promised Patrick I would do that. Made a
It's just go
mistake.
with the spooky vibes. It's spooky vibes for October, and nothing else matters, and
Oh,
that's where
right,
I
and
got.
I formed the read along for The Road by McCarthy.
Isn't that
McCormick.
really thick?
No, it's really
No.
short. Let
Oh,
me see
okay.
if I can figure, like, I need to organize these shelves so I actually know where in the world any of these books are, because I don't know where it is.
I know, because Patrick sent me Blackwater, and I'm like, it's like 800 pages.
Yeah,
That's not
that's
going to
it's
happen
long.
for October. I have 10 other books. And then someone else, I think it was Baba, asked if I started. I'm like, no, that's going to be in 2024. Yeah, that's a 2024 book. Sorry to disappoint. I have it planned out for October for the spooky reads, and I'm sorry that is not included, but I will get to it. It's just, dude, that's a lot.
Bro, I have no clue where my McCarthy books are at.
Because it's thin or relatively small, and so it just gets lost. You
I
can
mean,
see the thick books, and you're like, oh, that's it. And the thin books, you're like, I can barely see the title on the spine. What is that? I don't even know. And I don't want to pull it out because it's lazy. It's just going to be in the bookcase, and I'll guess.
right,
It's kind
I
of like mapping the interior on my little TBR shelf. I have to really stare at that to see what is it. Oh, it's Stephen Graham Jones thing that I'm gonna read.
yeah, I stack of my smaller books up here, but they're my writing books, not
Mm-hmm.
I have no clue. I don't even know. Either way, the copy that I have is maybe the size of the paperback is probably comparable to Danu's Curse.
Uh,
In terms like the sizing of it might be a little bit wider, a little bit taller, but it's like barely 300 pages, and that font is big. It is big, so it's also short. But I have 3 Stephen Graham Jones books, and one of those is mid-length. The other 2 are fairly short, and then I have The Road. So those are my committed October reads. But like,
get ready.
I would like to get through this. I won't have time, and that hurts me.
Yeah.
Oh well. The
Yeah,
things
I
that I do to
go.
myself.
Yeah, I know. Also, November will be nonfiction November month, and I don't know if I'll get through all of the planned nonfiction. But I still like the months that are kind of like a zeitgeist assigned themes, like October, obviously spooky scary skeleton themes, and then nonfiction November is nonfiction.
Right.
And I guess like I don't really go for the December Christmas, though I might read like 1 or 2 Christmas themed books for December. That's kind of a free for all. January is whatever. February is, well, like at least the first half of February is romance. And then April is poetry, but I did not do that. I
Right.
said I was, but I did not. Yeah, and just like it keeps going. But I am always most excited for October.
I don't do much thematic reading, generally speaking. Maybe a little bit. Like when I read Endurance, Shackleton's Incredible Voyage, I read that in December when I did that. I did American Psycho in October because obviously. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
um, I'm doing Stephen Graham Jones in October because obviously, and I did find it. It was on the stack on the floor that was hidden that I
uh,
forgot about. So that's there. But yeah,
yeah, it's
it's
not big.
yeah, and
Hmm.
like
Yeah.
that's
Oh
pretty
yeah,
big
that's
font.
interesting.
Like that's probably bigger font than your books. Not it's
Yeah.
comparable in size, but and then I forgot about this that I committed to for December.
Oh,
Uh,
look at that chunky book.
and that was also when I was going to read this was November through December.
Oh yeah. Well, I don't know. You have to pick and choose that one.
But yeah,
Two
because
chunky books. Who's gonna win?
this was the monthly classic for September, and I was like, okay, well, I can maybe try to do that.
If that's an interesting cover for
Yeah,
the
it
Three
is.
Musketeers.
Kind of strange artwork, but it's got a charm to it. But I'm pretty sure the story is meant to be slightly satirical in a sense, so maybe. I don't know.
Mm.
But either way, I was like, well, maybe I can try to do that. And then I look at it now, and we're almost halfway through September, and I'm like, Nope, not even a chance. Like, I'm not
No.
even considering like trying to start it. Like, no, it's not happening.
Well, maybe you go through it. That might be good.
Okay, your
Um,
audio isn't quite as messed up anymore.
well, see, it's whenever you get, into a great topic and it says "fuck you."
I mean, that's what it's
That was the
felt like.
same. Yeah, it was the same for Bookish Cats. Every time I got into a topic, or we all got, and then I dropped. I'm like, I hate you, you stupid lag. And then I just turned off my camera, and it helped a little bit because there were 4 people on the live, so it was a little the bandwidth dying
Right.
inside.
Yeah, because like it was trying to catch up every few seconds, but by that point you had already gone on enough time that it had to catch up
Yeah.
another few seconds. So I would get like one word out of every 10 or 15 or something, and then it would lag again. I'm like, no, stop.
Don't do it, ho.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it did it. It's a hoe. Don't
yes.
trust a hoe.
Yeah,
Did you
so I
get
have no
that?
clue what you had said at that point, but that's fine.
If it, well, you kind of just your facial feature might be like, as in you're paying attention, but it's more like I can't hear you, but it worked somehow through the
Yeah.
record. It's gonna be a great interview to see what and what not was cut because of my lag.
Well, it's only had a few lags. There was a
Yeah,
couple times where like, would delay like a half second, but you miss half of a word at that point, so that's fine.
yeah, that happens a lot. Like half a second is kind of okay, but
Yeah. It's still
I
listenable.
was wondering. Yeah, I was wondering if you want to go on with other questions.
I don't have any other questions, basically. The only
Okay, there you
thing
go.
that we didn't get super detailed in was writing process itself that I had thoughts on, but like, we don't need to.
Yeah, you could do it another time.
Yeah. And that's stuff
Yeah.
that, you can talk about with plenty of other people too, because I went over some of that stuff with Rockio, and that was fun. Um, that
I mean, that
video
could be
was
a whole hour just doing writing stuff.
yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm surprised we've been on the call for 2 hours at this point.
Oh, snap. Well, that's why, you connect with someone, you just keep talking, then you're like, "Oh, shit, it's 2 hours." Just, or 3 or whatever. Yeah, 'cause, I had the longest was with Brianna, but I've known Brianna since 2018, so
five
doesn't
years.
actually, yeah, it doesn't matter about the length because I haven't known you for 5 years, but, you get the
Right, right,
you get
right.
the point.
Well, I mean, my video with Rockio, but that was 2.5 hours long. The video
Oh,
was.
yeah. Mhm.
So we were on the phone for nearly 3 hours. That was kind of absurd.
That was cool. Well, it's good to chat with people that I like the whole you're not being interviewed, you're chatting, and then that usually leads to long interviews. Unless someone is like, okay, I can only do an hour, that's different. But
Right, right.
it's kind
When
of you can feel when it's forced, and it's like maybe just kind of end it. But some people think that you need long interviews, so then they keep going. You're like, oh, that should have been cut off at like an hour, but we're at hour 2, and like the um the awkwardness is alive and well.
I think sometimes it depends
But,
with certain people, especially authors. Long interviews can be nice because then you get to answer a broader range of questions rather than the ones that
mhm.
everybody asks you. Um,
Oh yeah, like how did you get started writing? Like, let me tell you something. I don't think it's that interesting, but I'll answer the question. And
right,
it's usually like childhood. You started it. I mean, I say usually. There are some people like, I started at 50. Love that. I want to learn more actually, because it's usually I started as a kid,
right.
but I think
Or
it's
you had a
interesting
dream
if
as
you
a kid.
started at
Like
50.
I've wanted to do
Oh
it
yeah.
for since fourth
Yeah,
grade.
yeah.
Like ever since I
Yeah.
started reading Rick Riordan. That was when
Mhm.
I was like, I want to write.
Oh
But
yes. Yeah.
I never like committed to anything until relatively recently, obviously. But it also longer form, like for me, like I like to kind of like start off with like basic like interview stuff, but I've also only done a few of these, so it'll
Mhm.
probably change over time. But it's like basic interview questions, but you have the time and the ability to, answer however you want in whatever length you want. And then we kind of go
Mhm.
from there. And if I have other things that I specifically want to talk or ask about, I'll get to that at some point. But, it's a little bit less like question, minute to answer, and then you have another question.
Yeah, those are I'm not a huge fan of those because what can you say in a minute?
I mean, there are some
Not that
questions you can
much.
answer in a minute, but there are a lot of questions that you surely cannot.
Yeah, like if it's a yes or no question, sure. But then also, I would like to explain my
Exactly. So,
answer.
oh no, you're starting to lag again. This might be our cue to just be like, okay, we're done. Alrighty, so that wraps up my discussion that I had with Nicole. Again, you can find her at Nicole's Bookish Nook on YouTube. She has also published some books as the conversation we had discussed. So if you want to go support her, you can do so at those outlets. Thank you for watching this episode of the Book Binge. I'll be back in the next video, whatever it is, because I don't have my notes up to check, but I'll see you guys there.